Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and today we have new 11.2 PTR Tuning with the exciting title of Hunters Nerfed Again over here on Wowhead. So let's take a look at what's happening here. With hotfixes that will be deployed over the next few days, we're making the following class adjustments. Frost Deathbringer Death Knight. They are nerfing Wave of Souls to 3% per stack from 5. Swift and Painful is getting nerfed to 5% for 8 seconds from 10%. This is the... I think that's the single target damage thing there. Swift and Painful now causes Wave of Souls to be 50% more effective on its main target, was 100%. So basically they're taking this talent and cutting it in half. And Exterminate First Scythe damage reduced by 15%. So this is Deathbringer, just Frost though. Just Deathbringer Frost here, not Deathbringer Blood getting nerfed, which is nice. Rider the Apocalypse fixed an issue that was buggy and when there were multiple Rider DKs in the group. Sandlane, they are nerfing Frenzied Bloodthirst here. This one is also not to Blood because it affects, this is the Death Coil side of things, which obviously Blood doesn't have. So nerfing Sandlane Unholy here. But then they are nerfing the 2-piece and 4-piece for Sandlane, which will nerf Blood if you were playing Sandlane, as this is the, it's not getting adjusted differently for Unholy and Blood. They're nerfing the 2 set by a quarter and the 4 set by a 7th here. So not the end of the world on anything there, but basically DPS DK, both Unholy and Blood, are getting tuned a little bit downwards. These specs were looking quite solidly at the top of the pack in the testing so far. Now, that being said, this is the class without a raid buff, so if they're not at the top of the pack and just in the middle of the pack, then you're not going to see them play it except on encounters where you need Death Grip, or if Anti-Magic Zone is really good, which Anti-Magic Zone... it is definitely really good in the raid, I think. So this might be a tier where, you know, I complained a lot about DKs not having a raid buff, and then AMZ sort of makes it so you still see 2 of them on every fight. That could definitely be happening. Bone Shield's getting buffed here for Blood. Bone Shield increases armor by 115% if strength was 100%. This is actually quite a large buff. Blood DK has been... especially in M+, the raw armor value of Blood DK is a really important tuning knob, and increasing it here by this much, is actually, you're going to really feel this. If you're a Blood DK, keys will be a lot easier than if they hadn't made this change, which is nice. That's a class and a spec that I think really could use some help in medium to high-end M+. Frost DK, 3% nerf across the board, Obliterate down 5% across the board, or sorry, I guess not across the board, but Obliterate down 5% in addition to all abilities down by 3%, and Unholy Death Coil by 20% down. So single target nerfs to the DPS DK specs, which, yeah, again, might reduce their excitingness in raid. Maybe you play Blood DK instead if they are bad. Maybe you play 2, who knows? Vengeance DH, deflecting spikes increases parry during demon spikes by 8%, was 10%. This is a Mythic Plus tuning knob. The parry, in raid, parry is not a particularly... I mean, obviously it's important, right? If you have 50% parry versus 0% parry, you know, you're taking way more damage over the course of a fight. But for the purposes of most hard raid content for tanks, a lot of it is like tank busters that aren't parryable, or tank busters and attacks that you have to be able to live even if you don't parry 3 attacks in a row. So changing the chances of that happening from, you know, 20% to 60% or whatever doesn't really change too much, because you kind of need to be able to live either way. For Mythic Plus, on the other hand, this is huge, right? Over the course of a minute in Mythic Plus, you might take 100 attacks. So now, as a DH, you'll be taking 2 more of those directly to the dome instead of parrying them. That's relevant, right? Like that, you'll feel that. So this is, yeah, trying to tone down Vengeance DH and M Plus a little bit, which I think is fair. VDH looks like it's probably going to be, if not the best, one of the best tanks again next season. And the sentiment from the community that I've heard is pretty negative about that. It's not like Vengeance has been OP for, I mean, they were literally not, they weren't the best tank in Season 1 of War Within, but they were this season, Season 2 of War Within, and they were for the last 2 seasons of Dragonflight, although one of those was a fake season. So there's some fatigue, I think, on Vengeance Demon Hunter, and I think my personal opinion is that VDH is a tank that there are a lot of players who play tank that don't really enjoy Vengeance. They don't really want to play VDH, so that's my suspicion. My suspicion is it would be good if Vengeance wasn't by far the best tank for M+, for another season. Even if it's a good option, I think people would really like it if there was a lot of success being had by at least one other tank spec as well. Okay, Druid, hero talents, Wildstalker. Vigorous Creepers causes Bloodseeker Vines to increase damage targets take from you by 6%, was 5%, so a little buff there to Wildstalker. And then another one here to Feral. Sabretooth is up to 5% from 3% there. Evoker. Flame Shaper, they're nerfing Essence Bomb damage. And Scale Commander fixed a bug with the 2-piece. So a slight nerf to Flame Shaper Evoker, which was going to be the Dev Evoker hero talent of choice on most encounters, I believe. Likely still will as well, even with this Essence Bomb nerf. Marksmanship. So this is the Hunter section where there are big nerfs promised by the title of this post. Black Arrow damage going down by 8% for Dark Ranger. Sentinel, the 2-piece, is being updated to a 10% damage bonus from 20%. Beast Mastery is getting a 3% nerf, and Marksmanship is getting a 60% effectiveness of trick shot instead of 75%. So actually quite a sizable nerf there to trick shots as well, which is going to hurt Marksmanship in Mythic Plus more than Raid. Although there are some raids, most raid fights, trick shots isn't a huge deal for MM. Usually they're more single target oriented, but there are some where you are trick shotting. But yeah, in M+, this is a huge deal. This is a large part of your AoE DPS there. Hunter was a class that looked pretty good on testing. It didn't actually look all that good. It didn't look, that insane on the most recent sims, but I think it was still poised to be one of the upper end of the specs and of the classes going into the tier. This is a fairly light nerf as well to BM. I think BM is still probably going to be fine, but I'm not sure. Mage, Sun Fury, Meteorite damage down by 15%. Arcane Phoenix AoE spell damage reduced by 10%. Arcane Resonance is getting nerfed to 12%, was 15%. Fire, all damage down by 3%. Flame Strike down by 15%. My suspicion is that Frost was potentially already a great option, and now I think Frost is probably going to be the default mage spec for Raid this tier, following these nerfs to the other options. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if we saw Frost nerfs and no nerfs to these specs in these notes. So, but maybe my understanding of what mage specs were good was a little bit off base. But yeah, I feel like these patch notes are saying it's going to be a Frost tier. Monk, Conduit of the Celestials. 4-set Mistweaver haste is down to 10%. Also for Windwalker, and for Windwalker, the Heart of the Jade Serpent duration is being cut in half on the 2-piece as well, to 4 from 8 seconds. But Windwalker, all damage going up by 8%, so Shadowpan Windwalker getting purely buffed. Conduit, mixed bag for Windwalker, still net buff though, I believe, and a slight nerf to Conduit Mistweaver here. Paladin, okay, we got a lot of notes here for Paladin. Herald of the Sun, Holy, Eternal Flame up by 15%. Sun's Avatar by 40%. Dawnlight down, though, to 5% from 8%. Second Sunrise has a 10% chance to activate, a 100% chance to activate, but no longer gives Holy Power from Holy Shot casts, and cast at 15% effectiveness was 30%. 2 sets getting doubled. Dawnlight healing going up to... Okay, so the 2 sets getting doubled, but the baseline healing of Dawnlight is going down. So on net, Dawnlight is still going to be healing less here than it was before these changes, but it'll be about the same, right? We were talking about what, like 9 point something percent, 9 point, I don't know, 8. But let's see, hang on, calculator. 8 times 1.3, 10.4. Sorry, 10.4%. As I was saying, we're talking about 10.4 versus 8.2 or something. Oop. That's the wrong button. Let's see. 5 times 1.6. 8. Just 8 flat, of course. Yeah. So, wow, that's embarrassing. That's a tough calculator segment right there for me. So, okay, yeah, Dawnlight is still going to be doing less healing than it was before these changes, but the 2 set will offset a lot of the nerfs here to the Dawnlight. And then, of course, Eternal Flame and Sun's Avatar going up, Second Sunrise getting changed, so it's not going to give you the Holy Power, but it is going to do healing every time. And then 4 set increases Holy Power spenders by 30% during Solar Wrath was 15%. Ret, Sunseer damage going up by 100%. And then for Ret, regardless of your hero talent, Divine Storm up by 10%, Wake of Ashes 10%, Seething Flames 20%, Truth's Wake 20%. and fix an issue causing Wake of Ashes to not benefit from wings when it activates Radiant Glory. Wow. So there's a lot of abilities getting buffed, although some of these are fairly small percentages of your damage. Obviously, Divine Storm is 0% of your damage on, well, I guess it's a small percent of your damage on single target, depending on your build. So my suspicion is, I mean, Red was already looking decent. My suspicion is this probably takes them from middle of the pack to the upper part of middle of the pack, but still in that general kind of middle of the pack-ish area. And this will be really nice for them at M+, for sure. Priest, Discipline, Holy Nova mana cost reduced by 75% was 87%. So actually, this is a mana nerf. Holy Nova is going to cost double the mana it did before this change. Rogue, Cold Blood cooldown now begins immediately upon use, but it gives you a 15-second buff. Interesting, so it's not one of those things where you just press it and then it just is on you until you spend it anymore. This is going to be interesting, though, because now, especially, I wonder if there are going to be spots like in keys where you'd ever want to, press this out of combat. I guess maybe not with how Cold Blood works. I'm not sure. Hero Towns. Okay, wow, we've got some rogue changes here. 2-set. This is weird. It's weird to see rogue changes in a PTR build. 2-set for Assassination for Deathstalker. Up to 60% from 50. 4-set up to 3 seconds from 2. Subtlety down to 40% from 50. And fixed a bug on it as well. So slight nerf to Deathstalker Sub. A buff to Deathstalker Sin. Fatebound Tails Coin is getting buffed by 17%. Assassination fixed a bug. Trickster, Outlaw, Nimble Flurry, bonus Blade Flurry damage reduced to 20%, was 25%, so a nerf there to the AoE of Trickster Outlaw. And Subtlety is also getting a nerf to Nimble Flurry percent damage, and deals a matching percent of increased damage while Shadow Blades is active, 20% PvE, 10% PvP. Interesting, okay. So maybe about the same here for Trickster Sub, maybe even a slight buff during Shadow Blades, nerf outside of it type thing. Assassination, 4% buff. Outlaw, 3.5% buff. 4% would have been too much. And Killing Spree is going up by 15%. Subtlety, 5% all damage increased. Okay, yeah, so all the rogue spec looked garbage, numbers-wise, going into the tier. I wonder if they are still bad. My suspicion is they are still like bottom middle of the pack at best, even after this. These are pretty small numbers, and it felt like they were behind by further than that. But it's one of those things where we play this game now at such a optimized level that 5% is like a chasm in some cases. So maybe this is enough to make it all good now. I don't know. My suspicion, though, is that Rogue could probably use another buff of this size. Warlock, Hellcaller, Destro, Wither damage down by 15%, Blackened Soul damage down by 5%, but Chaos Bolt damage is going up by 20%. Interesting. So Diabolist Destro is just getting straight up buffed. But yeah, Hellcaller Destro is getting some... I guess maybe this is a slight single target increase. Probably about the same there. And then nerf in spread cleavy situations. I guess buff when you're mayheming or havocing some Chaos Bolts out, so that could be kind of fun. Yeah, my guess is Warlocks are looking pretty good, so we'll see. Okay, interesting set of patch notes there. There were a couple other Wowhead posts that were new that I figured I would open some tabs of as well, we'd take a look at in this video. We've got some updates to the best in slot Cantrip boots from the raid. So for those who don't know, Soul Hunters, the 5th boss / you don't have to do this. It's an optional boss. All bosses are optional, though. You don't have to raid. But this one is explicitly optional. It drops these special boots that are bonus items. So they drop like in addition to other loot. And they have a special effect that makes your cloak more effective, trigger more often. Now, notably, the power of your cloak has been buffed in a recent build as well, which indirectly buffs these boots as well, because the special cantrip effect on them interact with your Reshi Wraps. So the Reshi Wraps got like doubled the power, which means these boots are now that passive also has been doubled in power, which was already, it's already free value. You're not losing secondary stats on these. So these things are going to be turbo bis for everybody, but they are now changing to scale with the difficulty. So veteran track Silken Striders are 20% more Reshi Wraps triggers than 30 for Champion Track, 40 for Hero Track, and 50 for Myth Track. I wonder if this changes if you upgrade him into the next... Oh, it looks like they don't. Yeah, interesting. So a hero 8 out of 8 piece, or 6 out of 8, I guess, 6 out of 6, will be worse than a myth 2 out of 6 piece for these items only, which is very interesting. Not a big deal, but yeah, you can see, here's an example sim that they have here of just getting that extra 10% proc on your Reshiwraps is almost a 1% throughput increase here, which this article says is a very small thing, but I would say, oh, I guess this is pre-hotfix. Okay, yeah, so this is, I see. So we should be comparing the 50%. I guess we should be, in order to see how big the difference in the proc is, we'd want to compare the same eye level, but the 50 and 40%. And this shows that there's 1% between Mythic Boots 50% and Heroic Boots 40%, but it doesn't really split up how much of that. I guess we know that 0.7% of that is the eye level and 0.3% of that is the proc, roughly. So yeah, okay. So I guess this is probably not a huge deal and really not something you're going to want to worry too much about. You'll wear these things at whatever track you can get them on until you can get... I guess you probably don't even... a hero track boots are probably better than... Or I guess champion or hero track boots are probably better than veteran with this proc. But yeah, champion plus of these boots you're probably wearing those pretty much forever. Okay. We also have Delve Trinket hotfixes. There are some buffs and scaling changes here to some Delve Trinkets. Some of these were looking... Obviously, there's been a history, this whole expansion of Delve Trinkets being pretty good. And they're more farmable on the hero and champion tracks in this patch and last patch than they were in Season 1 of War Within as well. So we've got a buff to the damage and a nerf to the healing of one of these trinkets. Some scaling changes to nerf the higher eye level versions of a lot of these trinkets. And a buff to the proc, but nerf to the proc rate of this trinket, which, yeah, wasn't looking too crazy. This was, kind of a whatever funny trinket, but some of these looked like they may have been pretty good. And especially with the scaling nerf now, it's less important to pick up, a hero track one of these if it's good for you, something like that, which that's really nice. We also have some updates coming to the cooldown manager, so it looks like Blizzard is definitely interested in still supporting this, which is nice. This feature was one that I don't know a lot of people that use this thing currently, but maybe they're out there and they're just not in the parts of the community that I hear from lots. But it's nice that it looks like they're really trying to go in here and actually let you pick and choose. This was huge. This is crazy that you couldn't do this on launch, but pick and choose which spells or abilities you want to display or hide, change the order on them, toggle whether tooltips and timers appear, set whether they're in the different frames, show unlearned abilities if you haven't talented them, search for specific abilities. I would like the ability to be able to make my own categories in here and then modify how those categories work, because essential cooldowns and utility cooldowns, like if I was making one of these for one of my tanks, I would want offensive cooldowns, defensive cooldowns, and then core rotational abilities, utility abilities, all of those to be sort of in their own categories that I could mess with and then have in a consistent place across all my characters. I actually would use that, I think, but yeah, I would. So I'd like them to add that to this. That would be, I think, really huge here. And then maybe I would start using this. It's not far. The only thing that I would then be missing is the abilities where I want to have weak aura functionality on them, right? Where it's like, oh, I want this icon here, but I want a weak aura that shows the number of targets nearby that are affected by it or whatever, or that shows, the amount of healing that's going to be on my death strike or whatever. Those sorts of things would be the only thing I'd be missing after that. But until they add something like that, I think I'm still probably not interested in this. But this is definitely a huge quality of life increase to this. And there's been some M+ tuning as well. Notably, the eye level scaling has been increased for, I think this is just for testing. So if you go into test on PTR right now, but the health of all creatures in dungeons has been increased by 10%. Creature damage is unaffected, which means player damage is currently higher than expected. While this change won't fully close the gap between player damage and creature health, we're making an increase to creature health to better support class gameplay in dungeons. The net effect should be that Season 3 dungeons will feel slightly easier than the equivalent difficulty of a Season 2 dungeon for a similarly geared character. We'll continue monitoring throughout testing and look forward to your feedback on how this adjustment feels. Now, this is interesting because at face value, clearly this can't be true, like, without there being some subtext that's missing here, which is like, okay, clearly if you just took the same dungeon, you had two versions of the exact same dungeon, and you increase the health in one of them by 10% of the enemies, that dungeon's going to be harder than if you didn't do that. But the idea of if the dungeons have higher health but lower damage, right? Which, because it's an infinitely scaling system, right? They can sort of do this, right? Like, if we try and keep a 10 at a certain level of difficulty, but we move the difficulty into the health instead of the damage, or, you know, we even have a similar amount of relative health to player power, but less damage relative to player defenses, right? Then that will make things feel easier. I'm a fan of this. I like it when dungeons are more about optimized damage and finding good ways to pull multiple packs together if you're doing high-level dungeons, or just surviving the key and, you know, doing your damage rotation well in lower-level keys, and, you know, those sorts of things. I like that more than when the damage is the hard part of the dungeons, right? When the hard part of the dungeon is in high keys, figuring out how to not get one-shot by certain mechanics, and in low keys, it's, you know, just going through and being like, okay, let's just never wipe, pull one pack at a time, and because everything's too scary, we can't pull two packs at a time without being super coordinated and stopping everything that they do. And like, if two of these shadow bolts go on the same person, they're going to die. Those sorts of things I don't enjoy when the difficulty's there. So in general, I'm a fan of moving difficulty towards health rather than damage. With these dev notes, they're sort of saying a side effect of our damage going up by more than our health this season was going to be a push in the opposite direction, right? So they're trying to neutralize that here, which means hopefully then, yeah, hopefully this all works out. Again, this is one of those things where the theory is all well and good. They're definitely, they can miss in both directions on this, but I tend to prefer it when it's slightly more, when there are more changes like this happening. But of course, the side note is the reason they're doing this is that they effectively had the opposite change to this done by accident by buffing our damage by a lot more than our defensiveness, which usually happens, right? Over an expansion, we usually get way more offensive power than defensive. And then a bunch of changes to Halls and Gambit as well. Notably, Fish Stick no longer considered a totem. Hopefully that means you can AoE it and stuff. That would be really nice, and have it get affected by, you know, I-beam and things. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, there's some trading post stuff as well. If you're interested, coming out tomorrow, today, whatever, August, we've got a chess-themed Grandmaster's Prophetic board. This thing's pretty cool. And then we've got, it looks like these are these returning ones with the asterisk? I think they might be. Yeah, some chess-themed stuff. Some suits. Yeah. Some staves. Look at this. Look at the checkered Grandmaster's Bulwark. That thing's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm out of tenders. The day after the last tender bundle went out of the store, I realized I wish I'd bought it, but I didn't, so I don't have enough tenders. I need more. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.